where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine you're coming, you're on your way back from shopping, on your way back in the parking lot, and you notice on the sidewalk there's let's say a scuffle taking place, and one of the men scuffling is, he's actually dressed up. He has a fancy suit, and you kind of realize, like, oh my goodness, I need to stop this. And as you you help others pull this guy, break up the fight, essentially, you notice that the man in the fancy suit is actually your representative. First off, I really want to get something out the way. Like and subscribe, of course. I really, really want to get likes up, and I'm really hoping that this channel grows. This channel, grows to something to where I have a personal goal with this channel, and that goal is to advertise for the weapons industry. I really, really think that I'd be the perfect spokesperson for Raytheon or other weapons industries in general. And just practicing out the wind, hey, do you need these peons bombed to oblivion? Do you want to turn countries into waffle cakes? I got just the product for you. We got nuclear bombs. We got private militaries. We will crush the citizens in your country. And I think you tell me what you think in the comments, please. I'm really, really trying to shop, and hopefully get better at my delivery and that. But really, I think this is we're at a point right now where it's looking more and more likely that a lot of our leaders are really thinking about committing essentially mass suicide, because they're losing power and control over massive populations of people. It's ridiculous, but it's kind of, it's ridiculous, and I think they should be made fun of in terms of the weapons industry in general. But I do think we're getting to that point to where we kind of got to wrestle out the power, wrestle the power away from these lunatics that are really in control in a lot of situations. But in any case, we're talking about Kingfish by Richard D. White, or we're referencing Kingfish by Richard D. White. Interesting book in general. In terms of the what made me pick this book, Huey P. Newton really inspired me, because this is supposedly who he was named after, right? This guy, Huey Long, was a politician in Louisiana, and he was from Louisiana. He started in local politics and kind of branched up into kind of the more on a national stage. And kind of learning his story really going through his story is the purpose of this particular book. But in terms of this idea of being inspired, I learned about Huey P. Long from Huey P. Newton. And this idea of disrupting the system from within is definitely appealing to the idea of a renovation versus a revolution. Now, in terms of this particular book, the author kind of makes it clear that this guy, Huey Long, was racist, and he made a few racist He made some racist comments and remarks, and I think, given the time period, I think it's you kind of be hard pressed to find a white male who wasn't openly racist, and I'm not gonna let that detract from the story in general, how things play out, and what we can really extract from the story. I think there's something to learn from everyone. But really, this guy's story in general, this guy was, this guy Huey, he started off, he was a really disruptive kid, and he had like a kind of a background of being this disruptive figure in school, and he like he at some point he got a petition around town to get like some teacher, or I believe it was his teacher fired or his principal fired, but he was really this was this idea of politics. He was a natural. He was truly a natural. And he was gifted at speech too, in terms of really just talking to people. Of course, you're envisioning like some kid, really getting a petition around a certain city to get this guy fired. This guy started. He was a very natural, like, in terms of he started like literally in grade school, and I think this idea, he being a natural kind of politician, I kind of have a natural distaste, or we've developed a natural distaste for politicians in general, because really kind of the idea is representation is evil by default, and I don't think that's the case. I think the pressures that face politicians select for the real scumbags in this particular like field, but in terms of this idea of representation in general, being a natural politician, if you find yourself also kind of having a bad taste in your getting a bad taste in your mouth from that particular wording, just we can kind of realize or kind of understand that representation is not evil by default. Even with our history, in terms of understanding the people who have ascended to power and what they have been doing and willing to do. In terms of Frank, one thing about Huey, Frank, I'm sorry, I'm reading about Frank Costello. This is, in terms of Huey, this idea of it kind of reverts back to also Frank Church, which is this guy who started this committee and this committee was known to really try to pick up the reins on government or organizations like the CIA and the FBI and things like that. But in terms of the church committee that Frank Church led, Frank still had his kind of faults as a human being and a politician in general, and it looks like Huey was like this. He was willing to do things. He had certain principles, and I think that's one thing that some would argue is a fault, but really, in terms of the idea of faults in general, he was someone who wanted to be viewed a certain way, and public opinion in terms of how he showed up in the public eye was something that he really fought for, in terms of he wanted to be known as a champion for poor people. Whether he was or was not, he wanted to be viewed that way. And I think that right there is a definite fault, because it wasn't about what he did. At some point he did plenty for people, and we'll go over that, but he wanted to be viewed like that, and that right there is something that we really want to watch out for. At some point, this guy gets into gets into politics, and he was of course an excellent politician, and he was really good at gaining support and making speeches, but also lying when he could get away, or when he saw fit to lie to gain support from the people. It was there was a situation where he was in a crowd. I think it was Catholics or some kind of religious crowd, and he told this story of the story of how he would get up every morning and take his grandparents to one church, ride his horse back, and take his mother or something to another church, and he was this. At some point, he talks to somebody in his particular staff, and they ask him about that story and whether it's true, and he says he doesn't even own a horse, or he never owned a horse. And that was it was such a moment of, oh, you really played this role, because it got you whatever votes you needed, or whatever support you needed at that time. It was pretty this guy, in terms of gaining support, he was not above bending, or not above really bending and shaping this concept to the concept of lying, to his or to favor him in any way, shape, or form. But one thing about it is he ran on a campaign of really free school books, and free school books for everyone, and the idea was poor Louisiana people deserved school books, and he was going to make that a thing that he ran on. He followed through. He got elected, and he this wasn't something that was really officially sanctioned by the state body, but he used his weight to really get a loan for school books, through the banks, and he did this, and he was pretty I really do commend the way he kind of manipulated this this idea of the banks in general, the bank managers. because he came and he said, "Hey, look, I need school books, or I need this loan to get school books, or we won't. This idea, you know, the state owes you X amount of money. If you don't follow through, we'll make it very, very difficult for you to get X amount of money if you get it at all." And of course, I mean, the banks felt, or the banks decided, hey, look, give this guy school. The banks eventually followed through, and they gave him school books, and they gave him the loans for the school books. Now, in terms of like the school books, he was able to do that, and he did that regardless of kind of the red tape that existed. But one thing I've noticed was when he got in office, he filled a lot of the boards, right? One thing we kind of have this fascination with who's in office, but we really don't look at who they bring with them. And I think this is extremely powerful when you focus on the actual boards and committees, because 9 times out of 10, that guy or that girl or that woman who gets in office can do so much and only do so much. But the people that they bring with them, they are, in terms of how they run their particular board, we're going to get closer to the people who affect our everyday reality when we pay attention to things like that. And I think, and when it came down to Huey, he was like he filled a lot of boards with people who were supporters of him, but also he gave, like, he was using government jobs to people who supported him, and like he used that to the max. It seemed like everybody, like that was like one of his main tactics in terms of, oh, you want this cushy government job? At some point he brags that, oh, my brother's the best, I want to say he's like the highway commissioner or something, but he's like the best guy in the state. And someone, I don't know what he does, but he's the best. Or he said that, like, I don't know what he does, but he's the best. And he was able to get away with that, like this idea of, running on, or this idea of throwing this particular this ability around, you know what I'm saying? Like, he was really known for that and very good at kind of using this to his advantage. And like I said, like, it was more than his brother. It was a lot of people that he would try to get into, or basically, government job, or get into government jobs where they didn't have to do much. And despite the people who, like, there were like cases where the people who were kind of subjected to the power that he gave these supporters, they were complaining, but it was what it was. In short, what I'm saying is he used that to a fault. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was really, really, like, shoving these guys into positions. I think the ability to do that is something that we should really look at, but in terms of the abuse of that is also a lesson to take. Another thing was, like, this idea of him running. He also promised, or one of his main campaigns was, he was going to, like, make the highways more, or basically make more highways to Louisiana. And a lot of Louisiana at this time was dirt roads. The way he did this is pretty, he did somewhat follow through on this, because in terms of allowing and making a lot of highways, he did really, really create more highway, quote unquote, because in terms of the Department of Transportation, the way they kind of standardized highways, he violated a lot of standards in order to reach this idea of really creating roads. And he violated this to create more road, or to create more, and really just kind of get this idea, or get get these around Louisiana. In terms of violating the standard here, I'm sure like this probably became a real pain down the road for a lot of people, but he was, I mean, in terms of running and making that something, he was able to do that. Yeah, or he was kind of, he followed through, in terms of what happened later on, maintenance, stuff like that. I think, like I said, there's an argument to be made about whether these are really even necessarily highways if they are able to violate, the standards set by the Department of Transportation. But in terms of that idea and what he was able to, or, of following through, I gotta respect the bullheadedness of that guy to actually go through that. Now, in terms of when he got in, right? So, like, he wasn't necessarily the pinnacle, in terms of actual, like, what he would actually, the morality that he would actually bring to his position. But like I said, I think there's a lot in terms, or he just getting a lot done. He was, he was called dictator a lot. At some point, while when he did get in power, he abused power in future elections, and it was so ridiculous. Like, he would even, like, when he would cheat on election days to try to make sure he or his supporters were still in office. And he was bold with his cheating. He was very bold. He was, in terms of this idea of cheating, like, some election ballots were like, they were counting ballots before this idea of, before they even opened their office. There were situations to where people would end up voting like 5-6 times. It was crazy. And he, like I said, he was known and characterized as kind of a dictator of Louisiana by a lot of his detractors. And he got into some physical altercations with particularly, like, newspaper reporters. Like, what I opened up with, this idea of at some point he was, essentially got into a fight with a newspaper editor for what he said about him, and he tried his best to limit what was said about him. And he, like, just, I can see, like, people who advocate for free speech having a serious problem with what he did, especially with the newspapers. Like at some point, he passed like a law where they'd have to pay, like the people they'd have to pay more taxes for their advertisements that they ran in the papers because that's how they got paid. It was pretty like he was known, like he was definitely he was definitely against the idea, or definitely against the idea of free speech whenever it targeted him, and that's what's very like. I think this idea of free speech is was something I would consider a personal fault. Especially when we talk about like his idea of being a faulty person and being able to kind of wanting to be viewed one way versus the actuality. I think that played into this a lot. Now, his enemies in opposition at some point, early in his political career, they got together and they were trying to really press him and press him in a lot of things that he was supposedly doing, like misappropriating and misusing funds and things like that. They brought up a case of really just get him out of office. And in terms of this idea of him being impeached, he used a lot of tactics to detract and get these guys off the rails in terms of with their goal of their mission. But one thing that I noticed that he did was he went to their towns and started basically an anti-campaign against these people in terms of whoever would vote for them in the next election, and their constituents in general, he would go to them and get them kind of seen in a different light in terms of the people that they served. Very, very much something that something of note, because it was at some point the morale kind of decreased, and he was able to kind of get people, or get the judges to acknowledge, or to basically say that what they were doing wasn't really constitutional, and get the case dropped. But he, in terms of the entirety of the case, it does not appear that some of the things that they were bringing up, I think, were kind of just in terms of this idea of what they brought up. Some of it didn't have the backing to really stand up and as an accusation to get someone officially impeached. And it seemed like those things kind of did more harm than good in the idea of him getting impeached, because he was able to eventually get this case dropped. But other aspects, other other things that happened, he did some pretty shady things. At some point, he was. He ended up kidnapping his secretary's boyfriend and his idea was like, or they were like one of this was the secretary's boyfriend was one of the kind of the main witnesses, or the main witnesses in the case. He had this guy, or he had like I want to say it was this guy, him and one other guy. He like ended up stringing, or basically like tying them up on, or having them stranded on an island for until the case was over. They had food, like it was crazy because it was just like this guy, he made sure they were okay, but he just made sure they were away, like 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 I'm imagining someone kidnapping me, leaving me with food, like, hey, look, just chill here for a while. We just don't need you to do anything crazy, like, be a witness. and like and he got away with that. He got completely away with that. And at some point down the line, the people who like he came back after the case, and later down the line, he said, yeah, these guys came out. They said, yeah, we were essentially like kidnapped by by his people, and it was pretty. It was crazy. I mean, it's surreal to think, but he got away with that. He was betrayed by his brother, and also he was betrayed by his brother, and tried to like, his brother became a witness, but at some point you realize the fact that that guy was family overcame a lot. At some point they mended their relationship down the road. But after this case, one thing that's for sure is Huey wasn't the same. This idea of what he went through, it was really life altering, and according to people around him, and he was, I think he became. This was early on in the campaign before he started I'm assuming before he started doing a lot of the false elections and things like that. But I think he became more dedicated to the idea of violating the norm after this point, and violating the norm and playing the game better, because he was good at this game. He was really good at this game of politics, and he wanted, and he became more bold in terms of how he played politics, not more bold in general. And when I say bold, like these guys, I'm not like, if you hear anything about early politicians, these guys were like all for the idea of physical. They were not above physical altercations in any regard. You know what I'm saying? Like it was very much something that was on the table for a lot of these guys. And this Huey was, he was known to get into scraps with the newspaper guys who we talked about, but also like I think there was like some older guy in one of his particular areas, in terms of, he was a representative in one of these areas, and he got into fights with that guy, and it was pretty. I mean, it was just like, it was funny because it was kind of a clown show, but he kind of. I mean, he was able to make a difference, and that was pretty crazy. But at some point, he gets really into establishing himself in the community and establishing himself as a figure. And he goes into the college, particularly, right? And he makes, like, before Huey got there, I think this is like ranked number like 80 something or some kind of ridiculous number, and he pushed that number like way up to like 20 something. I forget what exactly, but what he did was he financed a lot of renovations, improvements, and he was also this is, when he says financing renovations, improvements, one of, there was some kind of, I want to say, I forgot what they're called, but there was a building named after Huey on the campus at some point. And he was really into, like, the college optics in a lot of ways, in terms of there was some point where this guy noted how some new swimming pool was almost the biggest in the world, and he said, okay, cool. And he made sure to renovate a new pool to be the biggest pool. And that was very much, it's kind of the really how he treated the entire campus. But at some point he got like really into football, and college football. And I'm just imagining he was probably a pain, like it seemed like he was a real pain in the butt for like a lot of coaches in general. And he this idea of really being set on a stage was, or being viewed a certain way. He put a lot of pressure on this team to win. And at some point some coach like literally says to him like, hey, look, go away. And he starts to kind of come back, but the coach says, hey, look, this is my last day. I'm not, like, basically saying like, I'm not putting up with you any longer, go away. And it became it was that guy's last day, and that guy followed through. He made sure it was his last day. Very much something that something that he got, he was really anchored to, or really helped anchor him to the actual state itself. Because at some point he goes into national politics, and as a senator, he was really, he campaigned for Roosevelt, I believe. And this idea of, he was really useful because at some point, they were sending other people to essentially gain the public support for this, this election season. And Huey was, he got it done. He just got it done. He was somebody who went into different areas and really was able to spur support and also kind of make a name for himself as well, this idea of him, he was able to help Huey, but at some point, or he was able to help Roosevelt, but at some point Roosevelt turned against, or not really completely turned against, but he definitely turned his back towards Huey. And the idea was he didn't stay friends because this was a period. This was a particular period in America's history that included the Great Recession. And Huey had a plan called really Share Your Wealth, or Share the Wealth Plan. And his idea was really more like socialist minded in nature, and he did not, the idea was Roosevelt seen this as a threat because Huey was really good at making speeches and really good at garnering support, and like he was already known throughout the Senate for his kind of filibusters, and he was in these filibusters. He would give speeches for a long time and make people laugh, and if he needed to really oppose a bill, it seemed like he was really good at that. Like I said, he was a natural at politics, and this idea when Americans in mass are suffering, and he has this kind of plan. Roosevelt seen him as a real. It's kind of this isn't something that Roosevelt stated, but it seemed like Roosevelt would see him as a threat, and at some point, he turned he kind of didn't really associate too much with Huey, and Huey also kind of said things about Roosevelt at the same time, like this idea of, he wasn't really stern, he wasn't known as a strong person or a strong man in general, and Huey started to kind of talk about him as well in private, but in public, everything was okay. This idea of Huey being kind of interpreted as a threat. At some point, Roosevelt, comes out to say something about Huey, and turns out that Huey was goading him into kind of mentioning him to give, to respond in a certain way, because everyone thought that, okay, well, Huey's just gonna kind of just tear into this guy, and he ends up tearing into Roosevelt's plan in terms of why, in trying to get in giving kind of a more analysis of why his plan should, is the preferred plan. Very much something to think about, and something that is something that really helps in terms of this idea in general, when it comes down to how the inner workings really happen, because this idea of Frank Church was one thing, but what, really, one thing, and if you haven't watched the Frank Church Committee, or if you haven't really, heard the Frank Church Committee episode, please look back at that. But in terms of what he was able to do with, on a national stage, that was one element of politics, what he did. In terms of what Huey did, filling, the committees and things of that nature, and the lessons really learned from getting from technically the bottom, in terms of coming from the bottom and reaching the top, and coming from kind of a smaller space and reaching out into national politics. Huey's story gave a completely different perspective on that, and something very much valuable in terms of how to transform society from really the local level to branch out from there. Now, at some point, regardless of whether this share your wealth plan would have been good for the majority of Americans, Huey wanted to be seen in this light. Huey wanted to be, he wanted to be seen as a person, and I think that really, really hindered his effectiveness in actually doing and accomplishing a lot of goals, or accomplishing for the people. At some point in the end, you kind of, this. We kind of go through really the mishaps or not really mishaps, but the arguments that people make against Huey, and you see that he left a mixed bag legacy, right? And he was able to do and follow through on certain things. I think those things are not to be discounted. But there were people who had problems with Huey and how he did things and what he did in general. In the end, he was assassinated, and this was by one of his detractors had a son-in-law or something like that, and essentially, this person shot him, and he died 2 days later. But he was immediately killed by his security or his security detail. But it was definitely something for the people to think about in terms of how he did what he did and what he did, because, like I said, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag legacy. Now, in terms of the Renaissance in general, what we really want to take away from this story is the idea of who a politicians comes with in terms of when they are their administration, not just them as a person, their entire administration, and also how they influence the boards, and really, really holding politicians, or essentially holding politicians according to that standard of not just the promises, but the people that they put in these boards and what they do. In terms of the second, the information fed to people. Huey was really, really obsessed with this idea of what was in newspapers. At some point, he actually became very invested. He became personally invested. He created his own newspaper, and this idea of feeding people information, it's important. It really is important in terms of how to how to get people and mobilize people in a certain way. I think that's definitely something, and personally gave me hope in the idea of really combining open mics with education, and that's kind of that's an idea of really that behind the Foundry and in the Foundry series that's soon to come, if it's not already up by the time you see this. And the idea is really giving, or creating an atmosphere around entertainment, to where it includes both educating about your immediate area. In terms of number 3, politics is too much of a game. these guys, when they get into into political positions, a lot of what comes down, like a lot of what, the proposals that they make are tremendous, right? In terms of the effect that they have on society. The problem is that a lot of these guys, they get into positions, and it's not really about the proposal. It is about who's giving the proposal and whether you want them to be successful or not. This is, this idea is detrimental in so many different ways, and this is also an idea behind the concept of Democrats and Republicans being useful to the upper echelon of society, right? Because these guys are friends, regardless of what party they're on. They'll go to the same they'll go to the same, dinners and celebrations. But this idea of Democrats and Republicans, this is powerful to keep us in this, dynamic, because at some point a Republican really only knows about themselves that they're not, or they're against Democrats, and vice versa. This is something that we need to work on as a society in general, and this is something that I'd recommend us really, really giving less weight to, if not dissolving completely. And that right there is kind of the Renaissance and the Kingfish. Please like and subscribe, and please, by all means, leave a comment, or do any of the YouTube podcast stuff. Thank you.